My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 36 years old, which is old enough to recognize when a smile isn't warmth, it's permission. Permission for people to say things they'd never say if you mattered enough to protect. My dad's 55th birthday was supposed to be one of those harmless family milestones. The kind you take pictures of so everyone can pretend later that things were always fine. The backyard was dressed up like a magazine spread. Folding tables covered in white cloths. Balloons tied to lawn chairs. My stepmom had hired a caterer because Dad liked the idea of being celebrated without having to lift a finger. Music floated out of a rented speaker. Soft rock, safe songs, nothing with teeth. I arrived 10 minutes early, which in my family means late enough to be noticed but early enough to be useful. Lauren, can you put these out? Lauren, grab more ice. Lauren, do you mind watching the kids for a second? I didn't mind. I never did. That was my role. Background support. Reliable. Replaceable. The one who made things easier without ever being centered in the frame. I hadn't stayed at my parents' house the night before. I booked a hotel downtown instead, even though it was only a 20-minute drive. Some people spend money on comfort. I spend it on distance. Boundaries look like hotel keycards when you grow up, learning that home is conditional. My sister Paula arrived last, sunglasses on, phone pressed to her ear like the world owed her privacy. Her son, Evan, trailed behind her, tall for his age, expensive sneakers, that permanently bored expression teenagers perfect early. He barely looked at me when I waved. Evan wasn't a bad kid, just curated. He knew exactly who mattered in a room and who didn't. Grandma arrived shortly after. My dad's mother. Small, smiling, soft-voiced. The kind of woman people describe as sweet, because she never raises her voice. She just plants ideas and lets them grow teeth on their own. She kissed my cheek lightly, already turning away before I could say anything meaningful. "Good to see you, Lauren," she said, like a polite email closing. I helped serve food, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, nodded through conversations that didn't include me. When Dad started opening gifts, everyone gathered closer. Phones came out. Someone shouted for a group photo. That's when it happened. We all shuffled into position near the patio. Dad in the center, beaming. Paula leaned in on one side. Grandma was seated front and center, of course. I stood slightly off to the side, half in the frame, half out, where I always stood. Close enough to count, far enough to crop later. Evan stood near me. He was scrolling on his phone, pretending not to care. Just before the camera clicked, he leaned in. Not whispering like a secret, just low enough that only I would hear. "Grandma says you don't really belong here." I turned my head slowly, the way you do when your brain hasn't caught up with your ears yet. "What?" I asked. He shrugged, I still on his phone. "She says you're just around. Not actually family. Then the camera flashed. Someone laughed. Not at him, around him. That ripple laughter people make when something uncomfortable lands, and they don't want to touch it. My cousin snorted. Someone clapped, like Evan had delivered a punchline. I looked at my dad. He didn't look back. My stepmom adjusted the cake knife. Paula smiled tightly, already choosing silence. Grandma stared straight ahead, lips pursed, as if she'd said nothing at all, which, technically, she hadn't. No one corrected Evan. No one said, "That's inappropriate." No one said, "That's not true." No one said my name. The moment passed the way moments always do in families like mine, quickly, efficiently, without cleanup. I smiled, because I always smiled. Inside, something cracked, not loudly, quietly, like a hairline fracture that only becomes obvious when weight is applied later. I finished the party, gave Dad his gift, hugged people goodbye. I left early, citing a headache no one argued with. In the car, my hand shook on the steering wheel, not from anger, but from clarity. Because here was the thing I couldn't unhear. A child had said it out loud, which meant an adult had been saying it privately. By the time I reached my hotel, I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was calm in a way that scared me a little. Calm meant decisions were coming. And decisions, in my family, always cost me something. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was replaying the moment. Surprisingly, I wasn't. What kept me awake was everything around it. The years of context that suddenly rearranged themselves into something undeniable. At 2:17 a.m., I was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Holidays, birthdays, group shots where I was always positioned slightly apart, holding someone's purse, someone's baby, someone's coat. Proof of presence without proof of belonging. That was when the thought arrived, not dramatic, not angry, just factual. If Grandma felt comfortable saying that to Evan, she'd been saying it for a long time. Kids don't invent hierarchy. They repeat it. The next morning, I checked out early and went downstairs to the hotel cafe. The smell of burnt coffee and lemon cleaner grounded me. I ordered toast I didn't eat and stared out the window at people heading to work, moving through lives that had nothing to do with mine. It felt like relief. My phone stayed face down on the table. I knew what was coming. At 9:04 a.m., it started buzzing anyway. Paula. I let it ring. Then again. And again. A text followed. Paula. Evan didn't mean anything by what he said. Kids repeat things wrong. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another text. Paula. Mom's upset that you left so early. Mom. Not Grandma. Not Evan. Not the sentence itself. Just the inconvenience of my exit. I paid my bill and went back to my room. That calm from the night before hadn't faded, it had settled. The kind of calm that comes when you finally stop negotiating with reality. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app. There it was. The account I'd set up 3 years earlier when Paula called me in tears, saying Evan had been accepted into a private middle school with so much potential. But the tuition gap was impossible. I told myself it was temporary. A boost. An investment. It never stays temporary. I'd been covering nearly half of Evan's tuition. Quietly. No announcements. No acknowledgement beyond the occasional, "You're a lifesaver," text sent when deadlines loomed. The balance stared back at me, unchanged, obedient. Waiting. I didn't rush. I reviewed the transactions. Each one felt heavier now, not because of the money, but because of the assumption underneath it. That my role was fixed. That I would always give. That I would never object. That I didn't belong, but I paid anyway. 3 clicks. Pause payments. The system asked if I was sure. I clicked yes. My hands didn't shake. I closed the laptop and sat back. It wasn't revenge. It didn't feel sharp or thrilling. It felt like stepping out of a current you didn't realize had been dragging you for years. By noon, the calls escalated. Paula again. Then my dad. Then a group text I hadn't been active in for months suddenly lit up like a flare. Dad. Lauren, call your sister. Stepmom. This is getting blown out of proportion. Paula, are you seriously doing this over one comment? One comment. I typed out 3 different responses and deleted all of them. Any explanation would become ammunition. I'd learned that the hard way. Instead, I did something else. I opened another tab. Utilities. Phone plan. The shared insurance policy I'd stayed on to help Dad out. The streaming subscriptions everyone used but no one paid for. I didn't cancel them. I paused them. There's a difference between cruelty and consequence. I was done cushioning impact. At 3:46 p.m., I finally answered a call. My dad. What are you doing? He asked. Not angry, confused. Like a man realizing a door he leaned on for years had been quietly unlocked. I'm stepping back, I said. From what? I smiled at that. From paying to be tolerated. Silence. Then he sighed. You're being sensitive. That was the word, always deployed like a diagnosis. Dad, I said evenly. Did you hear what Evan said? Another pause. He's a kid. Then why didn't anyone correct him? The line hummed. This isn't the time, he finally said. It was my birthday. That was the confirmation I needed. Not belonging was fine. Disrupting comfort was not. After we hung up, I went for a walk. The city felt sharper than usual. Edges defined, colors louder. I passed a bookstore and went inside on impulse, ran my fingers along spines I didn't need to read. The quiet felt earned. At 6:12 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was Grandma. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. She left a voicemail. Her voice was soft, gentle, almost wounded. I don't know what Evan told you, dear, but families don't abandon each other over misunderstandings. I deleted it without replaying. Because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a confession. And for the first time, I wasn't interested in smoothing it over. By the third day, the silence in the family chat had turned strategic. No good mornings. No casual updates. Just that thick pause that meant conversations were happening elsewhere without me. In my family, silence was never peace. It was planning. I went back to my apartment that afternoon. Walking through my front door felt like exhaling after holding my breath too long. The familiar clutter, the plant I always forgot to water, the chipped mug I refused to throw away. It was mine. No performance required. I set my bag down and my phone buzzed again. A text from Aunt Carol. She was my dad's older sister and the only person in the family who didn't speak in riddles. Aunt Carol, you okay, sweetheart? I heard things got awkward. Awkward. Another word families use when they don't want to name harm. I called her. Tell me what actually happened, she said the moment she picked up. So I did. I told her exactly what Evan said. I told her who laughed. I told her who didn't say a word. She was quiet for a long moment. Your grandmother has been doing this for years, she finally said. You know that, right? I closed my eyes. I suspected. She's always decided who counts fully and who doesn't, Carol continued. And your parents let her because it's easier than challenging her. That landed heavier than I expected. Not because it was new, but because someone else said it out loud. I'm proud of you, she added. Those words hit me harder than the insult had. By evening, the pressure ramped up again. Paula sent an email this time. Long, formal, carefully worded. The kind people write when they want to sound reasonable while saying unreasonable things. She explained how Evan was confused, how Grandma meant well, how my reaction was affecting a child's future. She used words like collateral damage and temporary emotions. There was no apology. There was a deadline. I didn't respond. Instead, I made dinner, ate slowly, let the tension sit without fixing it. That was new for me. Discomfort had always been something I rushed to eliminate, especially other people's. At 8:40 p.m., my dad called again. Your sister's panicking, he said. The school called. Tuition's overdue. I leaned against the counter and waited. Well, he pressed. Well, what? I asked. You can't seriously let this affect Evan. I chose my words carefully. I didn't teach him to say what he said. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. He sighed. Lauren, families make allowances. For who? I asked. Because it's never me. That stopped him. You're punishing everyone, he said finally. No, I corrected. I'm just not compensating anymore. After we hung up, I sat on the couch and let the quiet settle again. My phone stayed still for nearly an hour, long enough for me to wonder if they were regrouping, or if they were finally listening. Then a new number flashed on my screen. I didn't recognize it, but something told me to answer. Hello. Lauren Hayes, a woman asked. Professional. Come. This is Miss Benton from Ridgewood Preparatory. I'm calling regarding Evan's enrollment. There it was. She explained the payment status, the grace period, the consequences. Her tone wasn't threatening, it was procedural. She'd made this call many times before. I understand, I said when she finished. Do you plan to continue covering the tuition? She asked. I took a breath. No, I said. I don't. Thank you for letting us know, she replied, already moving on. We'll notify the family. After the call ended, I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. 10 minutes later, Paula's name lit up my screen again. This time I answered. What did you do? She demanded. No greeting. I told the truth, I said. You told them you're backing out? Yes. You're unbelievable, she snapped. He's a kid, Lauren. He repeated something. Then maybe we should talk about what he repeated, I said. She laughed once. Sharp. This is about you feeling left out. Grow up. That was it. Not denial. Not confusion. Contempt. I've grown up, I said quietly. That's the problem. She started yelling about stress, about expectations, about how I'd always been sensitive. I let her talk herself into exhaustion. When she paused, I said one last thing. If I don't belong, I told her, then I don't fund belonging. And I hung up. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't waiting to be included anymore. I was deciding where I stood, and for the first time, It wasn't on the edge of the picture. The fallout didn't explode right away. It simmered. For 2 days after the school call, there was nothing. No texts, no voicemails, no passive-aggressive group messages. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you realize it's not peace, it's containment. My family was holding its breath. I went to work, answered emails, laughed at the right moments. On the outside, my life looked unchanged. On the inside, I felt like I was standing in a cleared field after a storm. No debris flying anymore, just the strange openness of space I hadn't known how to occupy. On the third morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Grandpa Henry. He rarely texted. When he did, it mattered. "Grandpa, heard about your father's birthday. Call me when you have time." I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. Grandpa had always been quiet in a different way than Grandma. He didn't manage people. He observed them. And when he spoke, it was usually after he'd already decided what he thought. I called him. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said after hello. So I did. Again. The words felt steadier this time, less fragile. I told him what Evan said. I told him who laughed. I told him who stayed silent. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a long pause. "That woman has a talent," he finally said. "She never gets her hands dirty." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You know," he continued, "when your mother married into this family, your grandmother made it very clear who was in and who was provisional. Provisional. That's how she's always treated you," he said. "Useful, but not essential." The words stung, but they didn't surprise me. "I'm done being useful," I said. He hummed. "Good." That single word felt like a verdict in my favor. By that afternoon, the quiet broke. Paula sent another message, shorter this time. "Paula, the school says Evan could lose his spot." I didn't respond. Then my stepmom. "Stepmom, your dad's blood pressure is up. This stress isn't good for him." There it was. The pivot. From anger to health. From blame to fear. I almost replied out of habit. Almost. Instead, I set my phone down and went for a walk. The sky was overcast, heavy but undecided. I liked that. It matched my mood. When I came back, I had 3 missed calls. All from my dad. I answered the 4th. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice worn down to something almost honest. I didn't rush my answer. "Accountability." "For what?" he said, exasperated. "For letting a child say I don't belong," I replied, and acting like that was fine. He was quiet. Then he said, "Your grandmother didn't mean it that way." "Then what way did she mean it?" I asked. He didn't answer. "I've paid for peace in this family for years," I continued. "I'm done paying. If there's going to be peace now, it has to be real." "This is tearing us apart," he said. "No," I corrected gently. "This is showing what was already torn." He hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, I got an email from the school, not about tuition. Subject line, regarding student conduct. I opened it slowly. They were investigating Evan for academic dishonesty. Multiple students involved. Evidence submitted. A formal review pending. I sat back in my chair, stunned. All that panic, all that pressure, and this had nothing to do with me. My phone rang almost immediately. "Paula," I answered. "They're saying Evan cheated," she said, her voice tight, brittle. "This is because of you." "No," I said calmly. "This is because of him. They're targeting him because you pulled the money." "That's not how investigations work," I replied. She scoffed. "You're enjoying this." I thought about that. "No," I said. "I'm just not fixing it." She hung up on me. That night, Grandpa called again. "I spoke to your father," he said. "And your grandmother." I braced myself. "I told them they don't get to cry about consequences after years of comfort," he continued. "I also called my lawyer." My heart skipped. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of watching the wrong people feel entitled," he said. "And the right ones feel expendable." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "Don't panic," he added. "I'm not gone yet, but some things need correcting." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. The family narrative was cracking. Not because I shouted, not because I demanded, but because I stopped absorbing the weight for everyone else. For the first time, the consequences were landing where they belonged. And no one knew what to do with that. By the end of that week, my name stopped being whispered and started being spoken out loud. Not kindly, but directly. It began with an invitation. Not a request. An invitation. Subject: family meeting, Sunday afternoon. Location: Grandma's house. No greeting. No explanation. Just an assumption that I would come. For years I would have. This time, I stared at the message and felt detached. Like I was reading about someone else's obligation. I replied with one sentence. Me. I'll come if Grandpa is there. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then nothing. An hour later, Grandpa called. I'll be there, he said. But only if you want to come. I do, I replied. And I meant it. Sunday afternoon arrived wrapped in fake politeness. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and overcooked vegetables. Every object was exactly where it had always been, as if the walls themselves refused to acknowledge change. Grandma sat in her usual chair, upright, hands folded, expression calm in a way that always felt strategic. My dad avoided my eyes. Paula sat stiffly beside him. Evan wasn't there. Good. Grandpa entered last, leaning on his cane but sharp as ever. The room shifted when he sat down. Not dramatically. Subtly. Like gravity adjusting. We're here to clear the air, Grandma began. I waited. She turned toward me. You've caused a lot of distress. There it was. The opening accusation. Familiar, predictable. I didn't tell a child he didn't belong. I said evenly. You did. Her lips tightened. I never said those words, she replied. No, I agreed. You just taught them. Silence stretched. Dad cleared his throat. This isn't helping. Neither was pretending, Grandpa said sharply. It was the first time he'd spoken. The room froze. He looked at Grandma. You've always been careful with your phrasing. But intent has weight. Her eyes flicked to him. Henry, don't start. Oh, I'm starting, he said calmly. I should have years ago. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but something closer to validation. Grandpa continued, You made one child feel like a guest in their own family. And you trained the rest of us to accept it. Paula jumped in. This is being blown out of proportion. I turned to her. Your son believed he was allowed to say that. Ask yourself why. She opened her mouth, then closed it. That's enough, Grandma snapped. This family has rules. I almost laughed. So do I said. And one of them is that I don't sit quietly while I'm erased. Grandma looked at me fully now. You've always been sensitive, she said. You take things personally. I nodded. I take exclusion personally. Yes. Her voice sharpened. You were never excluded. You just didn't fit. The words landed hard. Before I could respond, Grandpa slammed his cane gently against the floor. That, he said, is exactly the problem. He turned to everyone. I've updated my will. The room collectively inhaled. Grandma's face went pale. I won't tolerate manipulation dressed as tradition, he continued, or affection with conditions. My dad looked stunned. Paula looked panicked. I'm redistributing assets, Grandpa said, based on character. Grandma laughed sharply. You're overreacting. No, he said. I'm correcting. He looked at me then. I'm sorry it took this long. Something in my throat broke open, not into tears, but relief. Grandma stood abruptly. You can't do this. I already have, he replied. She turned to me, eyes cold. Are you happy now? I considered the question. I'm honest, I said. There's a difference. She stared at me like she'd never seen me clearly before. The meeting ended without resolution. No apologies. No hugs. Just fractures. Outside, as Grandpa waited for his ride, he took my hand. You don't need their permission to belong, he said. You never did. That night, my dad called. I didn't protect you, he admitted quietly. I don't know how to fix that. You can start by not asking me to shrink anymore, I replied. He didn't argue. In the days that followed, the family scrambled. Calls, messages, rewrites of history, attempts to soften what had already been said aloud. But the power had shifted. They knew it, and so did I. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be included. I was deciding who got access. The days after the meeting felt surreal. My phone buzzed constantly, but I didn't answer most calls. I let the messages pile up like unread letters in a mailbox that nobody else bothered to check. Every new notification carried the same undertone: panic, guilt, bargaining. My family had finally realized that the boundaries I'd drawn weren't negotiable. Marlene's texts were frantic. Marlene. Lauren, this isn't fair. You can't just. Marlene. Grandpa's confused. Please talk to him. Marlene. We need to fix this. For Evan. I read them and felt nothing. Not guilt. Not anger. Just clarity. For years, I had allowed their chaos to dictate my life. Now, I watched them stumble into consequences they had long ignored. Grandpa's decision rippled through every corner of the family. The house, once the epicenter of control and subtle manipulation, felt smaller, almost hollow. I could almost hear the echoes of their scrambling, whispered debates, rehashed grievances, hasty attempts to rewrite history. But no one called me to apologize. No one came seeking understanding. They came seeking leverage, control, and I refused to provide it. One evening, Grandma attempted a final maneuver. She arrived at my apartment unannounced, armed with a pot of chicken soup and her signature pleading gaze. I just want to talk, she said. I let her in but didn't move from the couch. She placed the soup on the table, as if leaving a peace offering could undo years of neglect. Lauren, she began, family is family. You can't abandon us. I looked at her quietly. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just stepping out of the script you've written for me. Her hands trembled. You're taking everything seriously. You're cruel. Not cruel, I corrected. Clarity. I can't fund your comfort anymore at the expense of my own. She stared. I could see the gears turning. Trying to negotiate. Trying to guilt me. Trying everything she had perfected over decades. But this time, her usual tactics had no purchase. After a long silence, she finally left. The door clicked softly behind her. The city outside my window hummed as if in approval. Quiet, yes, but not silence born of fear or suppression. This quiet felt earned. That night, I called Grandpa. They came, I said softly. I know, he replied. And they're panicking. He chuckled softly. Good. Let them feel the weight of choices they never respected before. You've earned this. I leaned back, feeling the tension in my shoulders finally release. For the first time in years, I could breathe without anticipating someone else's expectation pressing down. Over the following week, my family's behavior became almost comical in its desperation. Every interaction, every attempt at reconciliation, lacked authenticity. No apologies, no acknowledgement of the humiliation Evan had inflicted, of the years I had spent covering for them. Just frantic attempts to regain control, to pull me back into the role they had always written for me: caretaker, mediator, invisible support. And I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on myself. The apartment became a sanctuary of intentional living. Mornings began with coffee and a clear mind. Workdays were full of laughter without the undercurrent of stress from family expectations. Evenings were quieter, filled with small joys: a walk along the river, a book by the window. The comfort of knowing my own presence was enough. Ethan became a steadfast companion, a partner not in crisis management but in life. Together, we created routines that had nothing to do with accommodating family drama. For the first time, I could focus on growth rather than repair. Then came the most unexpected message. Grandpa's will had officially been enacted. House, savings, lake property, all mine. The confirmation arrived quietly, no fanfare, just numbers and legal assurances. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate with my family. Instead, I sat on the balcony, looking out over the skyline, feeling the weight of recognition rather than entitlement. Everything I had been denied in acknowledgement from them was suddenly visible in the simplest, most permanent way: respect. Messages continued to pour in, but I treated them like postcards from another world. None of them had earned the right to dictate my life anymore. Not Grandma, not my parents, not Marlene, not Evan. By the end of the month, the family group chat had become a ghost town. Attempts at conversation were polite but hollow. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They had learned the lesson I had been teaching for years, without words, without theatrics. And me, I slept deeply that night, For the first time without rehearsing apologies or imagining ways to repair what was never mine to fix. Quiet wasn't emptiness anymore. It was freedom. Ethan wrapped an arm around my shoulders as we watched the city lights flicker across the Charles River. "You look lighter," he said. "I am," I admitted, because for the first time, I belonged to myself. The storm had passed, not because anyone changed, not because they apologized, not because the humiliation vanished, but because I stopped carrying their weight. Sometimes family doesn't teach love. Sometimes it teaches endurance. And sometimes the greatest love you can give yourself is the courage to close the door. I picked up my phone one last time that night and sent a single message to Grandpa. "Me. Thank you for seeing me." His reply was instant. "Grandpa, about time the right person did." I smiled. For the first time in decades, the picture was mine. And I didn't have to shrink to fit it.